we have seen a lot of investors and big investors and family offices go more to cash, some as high as up to 40% of their portfolio right now. And it's not because they're afraid or scared, it is they're preparing that if there's volatility, they will have liquidity for opportunities.
Smart money doesn't invest for the next 6 months. They don't look at it like that. They look in terms of huge cycles. Welcome, everybody, to the A.J. Osborne podcast, and I am stoked to talk about today, where's your money gonna grow? Like, what do you do with cash at this point in the cycle? Where are we at, and where are you gonna get those returns? And that's why I brought on the Cashflow Ninja himself to help us talk about this, because we're in a very interesting time in the market, and along with new administrations, big changes. So the market's changing up, and people are shuffling the deck, and people are picking winners and losers, and a lot of people get confused by this. And so if you got extra cash, if you got savings, and you're looking for, how do I make money? How do I protect my money? What are we doing here? So with that, man, this landscape has been crazy for the last few years, frankly, right? But it really seems like it's kind of hit this like pinnacle here where everybody's going, okay, where are we at? What's going on? We have high interest rates, but the economy hasn't, collapsed. We got all this different stuff going on. And a lot of people really don't understand different investment vehicles, which ones perform in which market cycles, why they do, and what this all means. So help me understand right now. I guess to start off, dude, where are you seeing things as just kind of the cards? How do they lay out in front of you?
What's fascinating is over the past 20 years as an investor, I've really looked at market cycles as a guide and something to guide just decision-making of what I'm doing as an investor. And of course, when I started, it was in 2001. So I was just out of university. I missed that whole .com bubble, so I wouldn't say that I learned much from that. But the 2008, 2009, the GFC as it's now called, the great financial crisis, I was an investor during that time. And I mean, what is this saying? Rock bottom's a college education.
Uh-huh.
It was great. And I came through that period. I mean, it would make for a much better story if I told you I lost everything and had to start over, but that's not the case. But did learn a lot from it. And, the reason why I'm talking about this is what it relates to now is you have to understand where we've been and where we're going, right? So I look at it and saying like, look, we had a crazy time during 2008, 2009. Market crashed. Everybody that basically is listening to this lived through that in one way or another, or was impacted by that. Then probably around, I would say 2012, we kind of hit the market bottom. And then, of course, we started to see everybody dive in and jump back into the market. And we have had one heck of a run up. And I would say this last run up was till around about September of 2019 when we had a repo crisis. And then, of course, in 2020, that led to we needed to throw, what was it, $4 trillion at our economy just to survive. So I think we would have had a significant downturn already in 2020 had it not been for that injection of cash. And of course, we had the events of March 2020 to contribute to that. So it was kind of like a perfect storm coming together, cycle correcting and a black swan. So $4 trillion was thrown in. That really gave us a boost up, I would say, till the end of 2022. That's when we started to see the interest rate spike. In my opinion, that's kind of where things started to top out and went sideways. And since then, in the alternative asset investing world and a lot of other places, these high interest rates have impacted a lot of investments. So what's interesting is that if you look at the big guys and gals, the Warren Buffetts of this world, and you also look at top CEOs and you look at family offices, what I just shared is very important to them because they do different things during different parts of this cycle because everything is cyclical. Nothing goes up in a straight line. Nothing just continues to go down and goes to zero. Some companies do, but overall the market doesn't. So they do different things during different times. So what have they been doing? During 2012, where the loss cycle kind of, from bottom out, that's where everybody went in. All the pros went in. And then, of course, that creates this influx and the market's coming back up and the general public looks at this and go, okay, this is great. I need to get back into it too. They eventually come in. At the top end of the cycle, the pros like the Buffetts and, of course, top CEOs and family offices, they start to move into cash. And, of course, they have to do it slowly over time, right? So they actually have to submit a trading plan to the SEC to deleverage and move into cash. And the same thing with top CEOs. Imagine you're a CEO of a company and part of your compensation is based on is paid to you in stocks and you're just selling this off. No, you have to do it strategically. So that's why you get a lot of news headlines of Buffett has been selling and going into cash, 7 quarters in a row. He has to. He can't just have a fat finger and sell everything and go to cash. He'll crash the markets. So, but they've been going into cash. So to answer your question, what I'm seeing and what I'm looking at is I get excited. I get excited when the markets are rock bottom because there's massive opportunities. I get excited when markets are at the top because there's so many people moving into cash, the smart money, waiting for, a Black Friday sale in the investment world. So that's kind of very, very interesting to me right now. And again, we can't predict the future. This is not fortune teller stuff and, tarot cards and that kind of stuff. But you just look at kind of from a cyclical standpoint of where we're at. We had many unknowns recently. I would say some of those unknowns have become more clear in the past month because we just finished up an election, but there's still a lot of things to develop in the next, 2 to 3 months until the new administration actually takes office. So there's still a lot of unknowns, uncertainty. And when that happens, along with markets that are just hitting all-time highs everywhere, cash is also a very, very good position to go back into the markets and buy at assets at significant discounts.
Yeah, the market cycle, obviously, as it goes, I like to say that I don't predict markets and I don't know where markets are going, but my money does. And what I mean by that is just when I'm looking at overall yields and when I'm looking at borrowing rates, things like that, there comes a natural point where it's like, this doesn't make sense anymore. And then after that, you usually get extended and then things go back and then you start investing again. It's not that we know what's going to happen. It's not that we're even trying to. We're just trying to look at fundamentals and when things get out of whack. So there's actually disproportionate times in assets yields to leverage to where things get exaggerated because investors are looking for something and doing things that aren't predicated on fundamentals a lot. And when you get in those types of cycles, generally you see that. And we saw this through 20 to 22, and we got into a cash position. And so we started refinancing at massively low rates, our whole portfolio, and bringing in lots of cash because we believed, and I wrote about this clear back in 21 and 22, that we would see a huge spike in interest rates and it was going to hurt commercial and real estate in general. And so we were refinancing and doing all of those things. And when you look at, I think, when we're talking about where you should invest, the first thing is, you mentioned this, and this is really important. Smart money doesn't invest for the next 6 months, right? They don't look at it like that. They look in terms of huge cycles. And lots of them, it's a decade.
Yep.
So when I'm looking at assets, everything else too, I take that where it's like, I'm looking at big different cycles that I'm trying to invest in. And this is one of the things that I think really separates a lot of what is called retail versus institutional, or dumb money versus smart money, as the market calls it. And it's this idea that they get trapped at different ends of the cycle. So retail investors get trapped at the top after all the money was made. And then the institutionals come back in and the smart money comes back in towards at the bottoms. It's not because they know what's going to happen. And that's a very fundamental misunderstanding, I think, that scares people. That they're like, well, I don't know because I don't have the data to know. And it's like, that's not how it works. It's not that they know, right? And so first, I want to get that right out. Just like you said, this isn't fortune cookie stuff. That's not what we're talking about. And it's more of actively placing capital just to where the market is going to return. And where the drivers, I like to think of everything as inputs. What drives revenue, right? What drives yield? And all I do is I look at the things that are going on that actually create that. So what are those things that are happening that drive those things? And then what are the things that happen that take away those things? And so you look at it and you say, this is a natural thing that occurs. And these drivers are going to, eventually affect more in this part, or these drivers that take away are going to affect more, right? And that. And so you're looking at simply yield. And really when we try to look at where's our cash, where are we putting it, you have to understand that people want different things. So what somebody is doing, and it may be right for them, doesn't mean it's necessarily like right for you. And I think that's where especially retail investors get caught up. They see somebody doing something and all they do is run after it. They just chase it. Oh, you've been doing this. And then they hear, I made all this money, or this worked so well. You're hearing about that because it's the end of that market cycle. So you're already too late. That's why they've got the returns. That's why you're hearing about it.
Yep.
Right. So it's when you look at this, we have to be careful on that because we don't know. So even when I said we thought interest rates going up, everything else, we didn't know. But at the end of the day, it cost us nothing to be prepared for it. We moved into cash, we refinanced, we set ourselves up better. It cost us a little bit on our yield because of how we want to refinance. But looking back now, that's nothing. We're talking about a point different at 3.5%. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was nothing. But the point being is Warren Buffett and all of them, how they're moving, they're invested, they're getting ready for opportunities. And it's not that they know a date. You hear all this, oh, Warren Buffett knows that stocks are going to crash. And he doesn't know, they don't. We don't. So how do you look at what's happening in the economy to say, generally speaking, what drives these cycles? What are the things that actually make these things happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I just want to share another example because you have economic cycles and then you have market cycles. And sometimes cycles within markets are different.
Yes.
So I'll share an example. So Bitcoin is the latest thing because it's hitting all-time highs, right? So there's a lot of talk about that. So this is actually a pretty good example. Within crypto and Bitcoin, there's been a cycle, and it's based on the halving of Bitcoin. There's a limited amount of Bitcoins, and every single year there's this whole coding brought into play of how less is produced, miners are rewardless, and so forth. This plays a significant role in the crypto and Bitcoin cycle. So a great example is after, big run up in 2017, it hit a top and then the market cycle corrected. And they called it the crypto winter, which basically ran, after, because the halving was in 2016, you hit a top in 2017, it ran all the way into 2020. And again, it's kind of rinse and repeat. You had a halving and it ran back up. Now, what's fascinating about that last one, because the last all-time high was around 69K, right? Before it went down and went all the way down, what was it, 15K? So you had a significant drop in that one. What was fascinating was when everybody had so much fear in that marketplace, extreme fear, they thought it was completely over. The pros who had moved a lot to cash went in and bought at the bottom, rode it to the top. Now, the top of that last cycle, enough, because psychology moves everything that we're doing too. Yes. And one of the things, to your question is what drives this? One of the things is psychology. And psychology is that everybody got in and said, this is it. It's never going to go down. This is going to race all the way to 1 million and so forth. And then, of course, we had the crypto Super Bowl. Call it the crypto Super Bowl. You had Larry David with FTX in every other ad. You had Matt Damon doing a crypto ad for a company coming and calling out your manhood, basically, if you don't buy crypto. from a psychological standpoint, as you just mentioned, this is where the retail investor flooded in and said, oh, wow, it's official now. Like crypto is here to stay. The entire Super Bowl, they're just pitching me on crypto, basically. So they went in, and of course, a rug pull happened, and it went all the way down to 15, which a lot of people that got out around about the 60K, they went back in. Now, another thing that you also said is, nobody can pick the bottom and the top. That is 100% correct. Anybody that tells you they know exactly when the top is and when the bottom is, run away.
Run away.
Nobody knows. Not even the smartest people in finance on the planet know.
The government doesn't even know. And they have all the information.
Exactly. They literally have all the AI. They have AI
Everything.
that we don't even know exists in the financial markets, and they can't even tell them. So nobody times the top perfectly and times the bottom. So psychology is a big thing that drives this, and obviously monetary policy within an economy, right? A little bit more loose monetary policy, low interest rates, and you have a bonanza like we've had basically for a decade. Then all of a sudden, monetary policy starts to tighten a little bit. Interest rates go up, even though with rate cuts, which is interesting. You have rate cuts, but rates still go up because everything's based on the 10-year treasury. So a lot of people don't necessarily look at that. They just look at, oh, well, the Fed just cut some more rates. Everything has to come down. No. The investors, the market will tell you what the rates are because somebody's got to buy a 10-year bond and hold it for 10 years. So whatever the market tells you, that's where interest rates are going. So I think that's a very, very big driver. And I think then emerging technologies drive market cycles too. Like how the internet drove the dot-com bubble. You had real estate more and very creative products that were brought into the real estate world, drove a lot of that stuff in 2008, 2009. I think AI is really powering this one too. And I think, by the way, once there's a pullback in this one or a market correction, AI is going to come back bigger, stronger, better than ever. And it's a complete game changer.
It is literally like the internet because of the fact, and people ask like, well, how do you know that? When I'm talking functionality.
Yes.
So the internet made things more productive. Late stage internet was a perfect example of a technology that has come in and you've gotten all the productivity gains out of it. And then what you're left over with it is a consolidation. So when the internet happened, the 90s through the early 2000s was a productivity boom, meaning you could do more with one person than you could do with 5 previously, right? And so all of a sudden people got more jobs, they got to work, people were doing more, made more money. Late stage internet, what was that? That was social media. That was the concentration of capital and technologies and things like that. The productivity though didn't come with it. Like late stage internet, we saw massive wealth because why? All the ideas have been flushed out. We had the dot-com bubble. The ones that were gone. The ones that stayed. And that's when you had the blow up of mass billionaires and concentration, everything else. That is key in late stage, right? You get concentration without productivity. AI, right, will do the same thing. Eventually, the productivity gains from AI will peter out. They just won't be as significant, right? But we are still in the early phase. I was reading a thing where there's a company that has 25 employees and they're going to be the first $1 billion company with like so few employees. And why? Because all the employees are using all these different AI things and they can do the equivalent of a workforce of 300 people. And so you look at the kind of productivity that does and what that does. That it's early stage internet. As far as the functionality, what we can do. Like we've petered down our hiring massively because of it. We don't need to.
Yeah, and it's almost, there's been so much money running into AI and AI businesses that there is a tipping point on that too. Just like there was a tipping point
the dot-com bubble.
With that dot-com bubble, and it has to course correct. So that's why I have this conversation with folks about this market cycle stuff, and they say, well, what about AI? I said that still AI is going to be incredible, but just like internet, you would have told me and said the same thing back then. Well, what about the internet? The market's never going to come back down. Look at all these companies. After the course correct, I think it's going to be great. And of course, then there's other asset classes that are just going to grow enormously because of the AI. Because if you have all this data, it has to be warehoused and stored somewhere. So that's why you're seeing all these data centers being developed and new builds and so forth. If we bring in the real estate,
you're talking literally here about everybody. So what he's talking about is inputs. So it's like, okay, AI is a winner. Retail investors say, oh, I'm going to buy a bunch of AI stocks because they're going to go up. What we're talking about is AI is a functionality that drives productivity, and due to it has tremendous value. So what are those? Who are the winners of those drivers, right? Like you just mentioned, okay, well, those drivers, there's a reaction to it. If that grows and helps everybody, then we need servers. We need data farms. We need all of these things to actually create infrastructure for it, right? Certain industries and companies will do really good as far as efficiency, where others won't, right? If you have a mining operation, you're not going to be able to dramatically reduce how many people have to work on machinery, things like that, due to AI. Now, if you're a data analytics company, that's wildly different.
Yep.
So the driver will affect different markets and market cycles like you're talking about. And so it's looking 3 levels, not one, not just, then I'm going to pick an AI stock, right? That is the .com bubble. Well, it's got a .com, so I'm just going to buy it, when it turns out that didn't actually mean that they were going to be productive. It didn't mean that they were going to have great cash management, none of that kind of stuff. And so I love this topic because you're dead on it.
Yeah, and to your point too, there are different areas of when to get in. Instead of just buying a .com stock at that point because it's got .com attached to it, or an IBM or a Microsoft or an Apple or something, just because of that. That could take years. One of Buffett's best investments was an Apple, but it was later on until they looked at it as a business, not just the technology and all of the different areas that they've taken over and niches. So it's fascinating to see this play out. But, while this is going on, where there's a lot of uncertainty still, a lot of unknowns, a lot of unknown variables, and there could potentially be a lot of wild cards, right? Mm-hmm. Still, because you're living in a volatile world. Globally, it's pretty volatile. It's still very polarized.
Yeah.
It's polarized within countries, within the world. So there's a lot of wild cards still that could still come up.
And two, we have, massive wars. At the end of the day, the amount of wild cards that we have on the table is so disproportionate to the past in most of our lifetimes. Like you, I went through the great financial crisis. I had businesses, investments, right? I was working. We were lucky enough it didn't take us out like you, but I was working with businesses all over the United States, and I was consulting with them and doing different things. So I actually saw all these companies, the ones that failed, the ones that didn't. It was a horrible time. I went through 2 years where the only thing that I was doing was cutting costs because we're reducing workers. And I don't care about this bill because I'm not going to be in business in 2 months. And it was like a really bad time, right? And even when you look at that though, and how bad that was, still going back, the world was mostly stable. So on a geopolitical stance, there's more risks than we've seen since, you go back to the 40s, like literally.
Yep.
And so when you're looking at the risks and things on the table, you mentioned black swans, and that's events that no one can see coming that just appear out of the blue. And then everything about market cycles, everything about productivity gets, thrown out the window for a while. And not for the long term, but for the short term, absolutely, right? Like nobody cares about productivity of AI when somebody bombs the United States.
No.
Nobody cares about that. It doesn't matter anymore, right? It's gone. So all of a sudden, the only people that make money are manufacturers for food and guns and weapons, on and on and on and on, right? So when you look at that, that's a really important thing that we think about when managing capital and money. Something that I think about a lot. Hence the reason even on my investments, I have like 10-year phases and lockouts on liabilities and things like that. Because within a decade period of time, I understand there's all these unknowns. Right now, We have less unknowns, as in we have a new administration and there's more of a guiding philosophy and principle that's totally different than was before. But it's even more so because it was a total shift. As in, this wasn't a presidency. That doesn't actually matter. If we would have just had a president change and really nothing else, honestly, it would have just been a lot of noise, but not a huge amount would have ever happened. But this is a complete shift in government, completely. And so that is a brand new outlook. And a lot of people then say, okay, well, now based upon this outlook, we have lots of questions and what that means for us and where to put money. So there's uncertainty politically with that. So you have political uncertainty, and then you have market uncertainty from a standpoint of we have an economy that is at the lowest unemployment, that's technically growing. We can talk about that. But then also we have the highest interest rates in generations. Like in millennials' lifetime, I'm an older millennial. I'm like the first round, the first year. It is the highest inflation any of us have ever seen. And that's all happening though while the economy's doing. So then there's economic uncertainty, but yet markets are at all-time highs. So you can see then, I think, in a lot of people, that's how they're looking at it, is uncertainty. How do you think through that then when you're looking at cash placement and you have fear, but then you also have greed, and I don't mean either one necessarily in a bad way, a logical way. There's opportunity, and two, nothing could happen. We could be in a bull run for the next 6 years, for all we know. We don't know, right? So if you don't participate, then all of a sudden you could be so far behind. Everybody that in 2018 was like, oh, it's going to be over, the pandemic, they got out of the market, they haven't been in, they missed, the gains that they've missed are wild.
Yep.
Right? So when I'm trying to place capital, I have unknowns, I have fear, and then I have this thing where I'm like, I'm trying to hit my goals, I want to grow. How do you balance that, man?
Yeah. And what you just mentioned was the massive shift, right? From one administration to another, a philosophical shift, and it's going to be a different approach. So what that also tells me is that's probably going to lead to a very, very high probability of volatility and some turbulence.
Yeah.
Because when you bring massive change, or, like, for example, the Department of Government Efficiency with Elon and Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, something that, is very, very interesting that they're planning to bring in. That's going to ruffle a lot of feathers, and it's going to produce a shock to the system. When you have shocks, that usually brings some volatility especially in the financial world. So it's going to be interesting. Or, it could not. That's the unknown. One thing that I will say, you mentioned Black Swan, an event that you cannot see coming, out of the blue, kind of like just hit you you didn't see this coming from anywhere. I jokingly say, being from South Africa, there's a concept of gray rhinos. A gray rhino is something that you can hear it coming, you could feel it coming because the earth is shaking, and eventually you'll see that rhino. Might be too late, but it's coming. So one thing is for sure is there's the massive change, and that's kind of like the gray rhino that I'm looking at. So positioning capital, when you look at cash, and again, I just want to preface this. What I'm not going to say is like just sit on cash, hoard it, and like that scarcity thing. It's a strategic placement of I'm leveraging into cash a little bit, deleveraging things that are risky, and until I can see more clearly what's going on and where to position myself better. So, I've had conversations with Navy SEALs sometimes when they go onto missions and they're dropped, and they're very well prepared. They know exactly where everyone is sitting, where snipers are sitting, the defenses and everything. But once a while, they get into a situation where nothing was as they prepared for.
Yeah.
And what they don't do at that stage is turn Rambo.
Yeah.
What they do is sit tight. Heads down, sit tight, nobody moves until we could figure out what's going on and, how the battlefield kind of now looks and how it develops. So I take that mindset as an investor. So when you have cash, that doesn't mean you're going to hoard it and sit on it forever and wait until you have a big crash, because it might not. But if the battlefield develops and you can see more clearly and say, you know what, I feel comfortable deploying more of it, you will. Now, where do you position cash? There's a couple of places you can look for now. Banks is the first thing that comes to mind, right? There's money in a bank. That's the first place where people look at. For me, banks, very, very risky. That's one of the areas that I see in my world. That's a risky place to position large amounts of capital.
Like in the bank account, or are you talking about investing in banks?
A bank account and some of the products that banks have. You had Silicon Valley Bank go down. 7 other banks, which wasn't really in the news, also went down. You had 10 banks downgraded by ratings agencies like Moody's. When they downgrade like the big banks, that world works. It's really bad. They placed 11 on watch list. Why were banks in trouble? And again, people would say FDIC insurance on bank accounts. I would also say this is interesting. Make sure that your bank account, because we do still need them to manage cash, right? As business owners and investors, make sure they are FDIC insured, because not a lot of them are. You might be thinking yours is, but it's not. You'd be shocked about that. The other thing is that they only have 2% of cash reserves of the deposits that they're insuring.
Yep.
So they don't. There's actually no insurance really to make everybody whole.
Yeah.
And why? Why are banks in disarray? Bonds. So banks usually position a large amount of their capital in bonds, and some bonds they hold long term, but for most of the time it's short term kind of bonds. Well, if you had interest rates spike significant like that, and that's what took out Silicon Valley Bank. You're on the wrong side of it. Think about let's just pick a round number. You have $100 million in bonds, and all of a sudden interest rates double. You went from like a 2 to a 4. You could have that 100 million, the value of it that you would get selling it in the marketplace would be cut in half. It would be down to 50 million. So anyway, bonds is also, it's been a place where people warehouse it. Again, banks use it because they can collateralize the bonds to get more liquidity if they needed to as well. And then, of course, the other place, qualified retirement plans have this. That's the vehicle. You can have your money markets in those. I don't like those personally, but I just bring that up because other people might have them for many different reasons. No control, not good on the tax game, except if it's a Roth, of course. If you're looking to grow your portfolio as a real estate investor, doesn't really help you unless it's self-directed and an LP in a Roth IRA. And then the other area that we then look at is we look at what family offices are doing, and very wealthy in investors. And then you look at the asset class of life insurance. People don't think about it as an asset class. Family offices do. They do look at it as an asset class because you're putting capital into a asset class which provides the guarantees. It's guaranteed to grow contractually. You earn dividends in mutual insurance carriers in this asset class, and it's all tax-free. And then it protects the family members. So that's kind of the places if you have to look at it. Now, from a cash position, we have seen a lot of investors and big investors and family offices go more to cash, some as high as up to 40% of their portfolio right now. So, and it's not because they're afraid or scared. It is they're preparing that if there's volatility, they will have liquidity for opportunities.
Yes.
And again, if there's a massive spike and we keep on rolling with this, they'll eventually pick their spots to deploy capital moving forward, right?
Exactly. And I think there's a few things that for everybody listening, I want to make really clear. First of all, you don't have to know necessarily or understand all this mechanics and different things in the market cycles. I like to think in themes. And I think a lot of people, instead of knowing, it's more about understanding themes. And actually, I find a lot of times the simpler the themes are, the more sound they are.
Yep.
So when investing, you don't need to invest like you're an institution and jumping out. No, don't do that at all, actually. And you don't need to be thinking, well, I'm going to look and find a PE ratio that's X in a market where capital. No. Like, honestly, don't. There's no reason. When we look at broad themes, I think people should be investing in broad themes, and with an understanding of what they're trying to accomplish. Meaning that, all right, yes, if there's uncertainty, we talk about different cash holdings, things like that. We also have to remember, though, even in the worst market cycles, if you take it over a 10-year period or whatnot, the market not only goes up, it goes up astronomical amounts. So there is not this, like, anytime anybody has just simply taken money out of the markets, there's very few times that not being in the market has worked. Very few times. And so there's also, people need to remember that we can see problems. So a lot of times you're watching the news, you're hearing all this stuff, all you're seeing is problems. What you're not seeing is the ingenuity of the human race, their ability to fix and solve problems that were unseen. And so all of a sudden it can take us down to where I don't know what the answers are and I see the problems. That means I have to get out. The thing is, though, just because we even see a problem doesn't actually mean it'll happen. Why? Because we can fix problems. And this is where people get in trouble. They have such a large negative bias that they actually don't participate because what they see is real. And that's what I mean. I mean, like, those risks and dangers are real, but they're leaving out the other side of this equation, which is that they are, and people actually can do things to fix them. That's why when COVID came, everybody rushed to get out of the market because they're like, oh, it's the end. And then all of a sudden, not only was it not the end, the markets just surge and bull run because they went, oh, we can fix that, print, right? So there's these massive tools that people use to make sure, because everyone basically has incentive that the market goes up and continues. So everybody, all the money in the world, all the countries are working to make sure that happens. So I want to make sure people are reminded that these things take place. The short term, though, is where problems and things have to get fixed and ideas have to be flushed out. That was a bad idea. That was a good idea. And so when we talk about even like cash reserves, everything else, he's talking about preparation to deploy, not to avoid. There's a huge distinction in that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that family offices and people do is when they're hoarding cash, even like Warren Buffett, he hoards cash for opportunities to deploy, not to be safe, because he knows that his cash is going to be worth less every year. So if he's out of the market, if you've been out of the market and you had cash over the last 4 years, you lost like 50% of your money. Like the spread between what you lost and what you would have gained is like over 200% in the last 4 years, just a normal index. It's wild, right? So you have to be very careful on our bias towards negativity and instead shape for themes of understanding. Obviously, if we think interest rates are going to gradually come down or something like that, okay, what industries do better as interest rates come down, right? Okay, well, we've had a huge run up in the stock market and everybody's talking, it's a top, but not all stocks did. So if you look at it, almost all the gains came out of the Magnificent Seven. The 7 tech stocks. So what we had is a huge bull run, really, with tech companies. And that lifted the entire markets up, right? So all of a sudden, there's other investments that may have just not done good under high interest rates. And you may go, I think interest rates are coming down, so I think these industries would do good. That is what I mean by a thesis that is broad. We're not talking about picking things, but understanding those drivers. And you don't need to have any crazy, I don't want people to overthink it. And you may just say, high interest rates, bonds will do better. Low interest rates, they won't. Maybe I'll put my money in here while I'm just looking or waiting for an opportunity. That's really, I think people can get caught up in saying, I don't understand all the mechanics macroly. Really, it's like, look at the money, right? What happens when the cost of money goes up, when it goes down, and what are people doing? And I really get scared when people overthink it, then they freeze. And our negativity bias is so outrageous because that psychological portion. Negativity bias is a really good thing because if you're looking at a bunch of grapes in a bush, you may go, wow, I'm really hungry and I could eat those and get nourishment. But if you're looking at it and you say, but I see some weird things in there, that may mean that a bear is there. So what I gain is I get a few grapes that's really good for me. But what I could lose is I could die and be eaten to death. So we're negative bias for a reason because that actually is important and it helps us in those environments. It's not good for you though when you're actually managing money. It's actually very bad. And it's because you're not going to get eaten by a bear. You're just not going to get as high of a return. Like it's totally different, right? Yeah. So I want to make sure that we're not like overcomplicating, or us as we discuss things that we think are interesting, and somebody's like, oh, that's either too much for me or not. Take it back to fundamentals.
Yeah, you're in a game, and I mean, I love sports. Grew up playing sports. Played it for a long time. And you've got to play offense and defense, and you do different things on the field. So when you are in the opposition's half, now's a great time for attacking opportunities and playing great attack plays. But when you're, 5 yards you're on your goal line, that's an opportunity to play great defense and get a turnover ball. That's how I look at it. I don't even look at it negatively. We're just now, red zone defense. We're here, but let's play it tough and let's just make sure they don't score and we get the ball back. And then it's our turn to play offense again. I kind of look at investing the same way that way. And, it's not positive or negative. It just is.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. And I just play the game. And the big part of the game is you have to play offense and you have to play defense. And I will say this too, that, I also think of it in terms of you have the world economy, you have the U.S. economy, and then you have your economy.
Yes.
The same thing, the market, you have the world market, you have the U.S. market, and your market. So I like the control factor too. So if you're a business owner, and I also look at investors that's trying to build a real estate portfolio, you're in the business of, building your portfolio and managing your portfolio. I look at that as a business too. So as a business owner, the big thing is control over yourself. And, we talk about investing in yourself, right? I'm trying to skill up for AI and incorporate that into what I'm doing and learning as much as I can. Investing in your business, things are operationally around what you're trying to do, and then growing and scaling your business and your investment portfolio in things that you know. And also, I really appreciate what you said about the long-term view. Because think about it this way. In the roaring 20s, let's just say you bought a block of real estate in New York City. And everybody said, oh, you bought at the top. It's crazy. You're going to lose your pants. And let's just say you invested with a long-term horizon. It's now 1970s and you held on to it. I mean, how did that block of real estate in New York City on Manhattan do for you? I would say probably okay.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. This really gets to the point because guys, it's hard to over exaggerate the importance of psychology investing, because when people get scared, they're terrified.
Yep.
And when people get greedy, they're really greedy. And so when the bottoms and the tops come, they're over exaggerated. The money's made in the middle. It's not made, right? That opportunities come to either get out or get in, but the money's not made. You buy at the bottom, but your money's not made until the growth comes, right?
Right.
And you sell at the top. Well, okay, that's fine. You got cash, but now you don't have any cash. And the markets, if you're selling too, will probably keep going up until it eventually stops. So then you have to wait to redeploy that capital.
Yep.
So that's positioning, but that's not the money making, right? The money making happens in the middle. And that's the part that everybody always overlooks. Everybody always hears when bubbles burst, right? Or after the fact when things were dirt cheap, everything else, but they forget about the middle, those fundamentals. And when you're investing locally too, it gets back down to this idea. Like if you're in real estate, it's a local game. If you're in commercial real estate, you're servicing whatever, a 3-mile radius. That's it. So like, yes, you have interest rates, you have different things like that. But at the end of the day, you have this area. And two, the United States performs dramatically different given a state. Like you have states that have shrunk by 2%, but then you have other ones that have grown by 2%. That's a 4% spread. The United States growing at 4% is boom times.
Yep.
So the difference between the two is a good growing economy and a big recession. So that you all of a sudden like get back to those fundamentals and you look around and things get simpler. Like you said, you're running a business. If you guys have $10,000 and you are going to invest your $10,000, it's a business. What do you need to make sure that your investments are growing? What do you need to understand, right? What are you going to put it in? And what are you trying to accomplish? And you need to think about it as your economy. I absolutely love that. Here's my $10,000 for my business. I'm going to invest it. What am I trying to accomplish with that, right? And then as I'm investing, you should be following it up. You should be looking at things and understanding. So then what are the things that you just need to understand, right? Simplify it, build it down, bring it back to you. And that will really help cut through the noise, really help cut through all the noise.
Yeah. And I would also say for investors too, besides, if we're talking about the game, as I shared, like, you're playing offense and defense, a lot of, the big defense obviously is, to protect your capital and protect your portfolio. That's your red zone defense. But also the other things that I would also share that folks always have to incorporate too, taxes is the big one.
It's your largest expense.
Yeah, exactly. If you do not have a strategy for that in place, that is going to erode a lot of the gains that you're going to make as an investor. And also the other one is inflation, where, business owners that have operating businesses understand that, investors understand that. Here's a great tool too. There's a tool called trueflation.org. I'm not sure if you've seen that.
I haven't.
It's fascinating.
True inflation?
Yeah, it's an AI bot that scrapes the internet and then tells you the real rate of inflation. So it'll shock people if you look at from 2020 to today, compounded for inflation. Trueflation has us at over 26% just of inflation.
Yeah.
So, to get the real data and analytics and understand that what that means and how you have to operate, it's a big thing to protect against. So tax is the same thing, right? If you actually look at the amount of taxes that people pay, they just look at their tax return at the end or their business tax return and look at it and say, well, it's manageable, but look at all the other areas where you get hit with taxes. You have to be cognizant of that too. So that's what I'll share. Another thing is obviously protecting the capital, but also other things that you might not have front and center because you're focusing so much on the investment portfolio or the business of the investment portfolio.
I absolutely love that. And I love too, you mentioned Trueflation. What are other areas that you look for information? So for me, I don't look at major news outlets or anything for information because all that's noise. That's not actually information. So
right.
Where are you going then? So especially to cut out the key things that drive emotional, so when you read the news, they insert things that create emotional reaction, that over-exaggerate dangers or positives, right? Not good for investing at all. So where are you going? I love this Trueflation. What are other areas that you're looking at?
Yeah, so if you're looking for specifically data, John Williams with Shadow Stats is pretty good too, where they calculate all of the government data, how they previously calculated before all the shenanigans started. So you get some pretty good, accurate data over there. There are AI tools like I mentioned, the Trueflation. But you know what? The best information that you actually get is from other people. And speaking to other people. So if you can find yourself in groups where there are people in different parts of the country or in different parts of the world, that's very powerful. Over the past 4 or 5 years, there has been, people that I've met that I've stayed in contact with and in touch with, they're in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what's going on in the Middle East because I have a friend that lives in Dubai and travels throughout the Middle East constantly, right?
Yeah.
So that type of boots on the ground intelligence is the best, so try that also in the United States for different markets. What's actually going on there?
Go to industry specific stuff. So if you have a question on let's say, real estate industry, right? Even the housing market, something like that. Don't go to the news, publications, anything else like that, right?
Yeah.
Go to people that's what they're doing full time and they're active in it. Not that they're passive in it. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
Active. They're actually day to day. They have businesses that do that thing and listen to what they're saying and doing. And it's amazing what you hear about the reality of the situation in different markets, things like that, that you're like, oh, okay, that it's not at all what it may seem, right? And we have so much information. That's actually easy to do, to go in directly into the industry people that are doing the day-to-day, not passively, not writing about it, they're just doing the thing. and hearing what they have to say about their day-to-days and what they're seeing and where they've done, everything else. And it gives a completely different viewpoint of the market.
Completely. I mean, like for real estate specific, if you're looking at a specific market that you want to buy, for example, an Airbnb in, it's interesting. You go talk to a listing agent that do open houses and they will tell you, man, I had like 10 properties listed, 10 open houses and nobody showed up. And these are all great properties. It tells you something about the market.
Yeah.
Or the opposite. It was like just hundreds of people coming through the door, bidding it down, we're in a price war.
Yeah.
So you'll get a good feel of what it is. Analysts, they're not necessarily going to give you that information.
Nope.
I like the boots on the ground stuff direct from the source.
Me too. No, that's awesome. Dude, we've been already going for an hour, man, and I could literally just go for more, but I want to be respectful of your time. So you have so much more to talk about, so much more to give. You've written books. Please, will you tell everybody where they can go to your stuff's great. You even have a newsletter where they can go to learn more from you and obviously get to things that we don't have time to cover here.
No, I appreciate it. So cashflowninja.com is where I have over 1,000 podcasts. And we've got 4 books. We have a weekly newsletter that they can subscribe for there. And then I also just released a book, Get Wealthy for Sure. The number one financial strategy for business owners to multiply wealth predictably. And just so for your audience, your listeners, and your viewers out there, you can request a free copy of the book, only pay for shipping and handling. I put a page together at getwealthyforsure.com. That's getwealthyforsure.com. If they're interested, just in requesting a copy of the free book, we'll ship them out to you. Just pay for shipping, and that's at getwealthyforsure.com.
Awesome, dude. Hey, I appreciate your time, man, and giving us a feel for the market and how you look at things and approach. It's extraordinarily valuable. And everybody go check out stuff and grab that book, anything that you guys can get to help you out during this time. It's going to be huge. So appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.